Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're venturing into the fascinating realm of Estonian national security.
Hmm.
You've provided some really compelling sources focusing on the Estonian Internal Security Service, Kaitsepolitseiamet, or KPO as it's known.
Right, KPO.
Our goal is to get beyond just a surface look and really try to understand its history, its core operations, and, well, some of the complexities around its actions, too. Let's get started.
Absolutely. We've got a good mix here, official stuff from KPO itself, but also reports that offer, let's say, more critical views.
Okay.
So yeah, the idea is to pull all that together to give you a really nuanced picture of this key Estonian institution.
Okay, so let's dive right in then. The Estonian Internal Security Service, KPO, it's set up as the main pillar for protecting Estonia's constitutional framework,
That's the core idea, yeah.
and it operates under the Ministry of Internal Affairs. What strikes me first is just the sheer weight of that responsibility enforcing the constitutional order. That's huge.
It really is. And that broad mandate, it translates into a whole range of crucial jobs.
Yeah.
For instance, they have the main responsibility for investigating crimes by state officials.
Which is vital for accountability, right?
Absolutely fundamental.
Yeah.
And then you've got countering terrorism, dealing with incitement to hatred, investigating really serious international crimes like crimes against humanity,
Yeah.
war crimes.
Wow.
It speaks to the gravity of their work.
Right, and it's not just those sort of high-profile, maybe headline-grabbing things. They're also handling the illegal movement or possession of dangerous stuff, firearms, explosives, even radioactive materials.
Yeah, the tangible threats.
Exactly. Plus, the classic security service role, protecting state secrets and doing counterintelligence. It really paints a picture of an agency with incredibly diverse and significant duties.
And what's quite interesting, especially for this kind of organization, which is often, pretty secretive.
Necessarily so sometimes.
Right. Is that KPO actually publishes an annual overview. It's called the Kaitsepolitseiamet, a national security yearbook, essentially.
Oh, interesting.
It suggests they're making a deliberate effort to offer some public insight into, well, what they see as the main threats and their priorities.
That raises a great question, though, doesn't it? What kind of information do they actually choose to put in there? It must be a real balancing act, informing the public versus not giving away sensitive operations or, intelligence sources.
Precisely. It's that classic tension. This report seems like a key place where that idea of transparency meets the hard realities of national security work.
Okay, so let's rewind a bit. Where did this organization actually come from?
Well, its roots go back to 1920. It was established then as the Political Police, Politoline Polizei, or Polpol.
Polpol, the name itself, political police, especially in a new republic. It makes you immediately wonder what its initial focus was and how that might have changed over time.
It does. And between, say, 1925 and 1940, Polpol's activities give us a fascinating window into what Estonia saw as threats back then.
Like what?
They were focused on subversive activities by political extremists, espionage, desertion from the military, smuggling, and even terrorism as it was understood then.
So what kind of subversive activities are we talking about? Who are the main targets?
Well, the sources point to a few key groups. Estonian communists, for one. They were operating underground after their party was banned following a failed coup attempt.
And they had outside support.
Yeah, supported by the Soviet Union, which interestingly had a different view on the legitimacy of, well, revolutionary violence back then.
Totally different world.
Totally. Polpol also targeted pro-Nazi Baltic Germans within Estonia and even extreme monarchists among the white Russian emigre community.
So a real ideological battleground.
It really paints a picture of the intense struggles in Europe at that time.
Yeah.
And Estonia was right in the thick of it.
Then came the Soviet occupation. The impact on Polpol sounds absolutely devastating.
It was. The source uses the phrase practically in corpore repressed during the June 1940 deportations. Almost every single employee was deported.
Unbelievable.
And the numbers are just chilling. By the end of World War II, over 90% of Polpol employees and their families had been killed.
90%. That's almost total annihilation of an institution and the people in it. How does an agency even recover from that kind of historical trauma? It must have shaped the modern KAPO profoundly.
You have to think it did. That level of loss, that experience, it likely embedded a deep awareness of just how fragile Estonian independence was and probably a heightened sensitivity to external threats, especially from Russia.
So its reestablishment must have been hugely significant.
Hugely. It was reformed on March 1st, 1991, right as Estonia was regaining its independence.
Okay.
Initially, it was just a department within the main police force, but then in June 1993, it became a completely separate entity.
Suggesting a need for a more specialized focus.
Exactly. Recognizing that security work in a newly independent state, especially one with Estonia's history, needed its own dedicated structure.
And then another shift later on.
Yes, in 2001. A new law changed its status. It went from being classified as a police institution to being a security service.
What did that mean in practice? Different powers, different oversight.
It likely formalized a shift towards a more intelligence-led approach.
Yeah.
Perhaps broader powers in areas like counterintelligence, national security investigations, things that might stretch beyond traditional policing. It signals, a deepening of the state's focus on these specialized security functions.
Okay, but it hasn't all been smooth sailing. The sources mention controversies.
Right. There's a notable one from 2009 involving Amnesty International.
What happened there?
Well, Amnesty flagged concerns about KAPO's annual report that year. Apparently, the report made some quite serious allegations against an NGO called the Legal Information Center for Human Rights, or LICHR.
What did KAPO accuse them of?
They accused LICHR, which focused on linguistic minority rights, mainly the Russian-speaking minority, of being used by Russia for propaganda purposes, and also of hiding where its funding came from.
Wow. Those are serious claims for a security service to make publicly against an NGO.
Very serious. And the concern raised by Amnesty and others was that this might have been an attempt by KAPO to discredit LICHR and undermine its work, particularly on sensitive minority issues.
Yeah, that raises big questions about the role of a security service in a democracy, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Where's the line between legitimate security concerns and potentially stifling civil society or advocacy groups?
That's the crux of it. How do you ensure security services don't overstep, especially when dealing with NGOs that might be critical of government policy or working on potentially contentious issues? It's about oversight and accountability.
And there was another legal challenge mentioned?
Yes, also around 2009, a Finnish lawyer living in Tallinn, Risto Taninen, who is described in the sources as having neo-Nazi affiliations. He actually launched criminal proceedings against KAPO, accusing them of politically motivated persecution against, in his view, innocent people.
Right. Regardless of who's making the accusation, the fact that someone felt they could publicly accuse the security service of political persecution. What does that tell us?
Well, even if the claims themselves are debatable or lack foundation, the very fact they're aired publicly can fuel questions about the agency's methods and impartiality. It just highlights that constant pressure on security services to operate transparently and within strict legal bounds to maintain public trust even, or perhaps especially, when dealing with individuals holding extreme or unpopular views.
So looking at KAPO now, it's part of the Ministry of Internal Affairs, suggesting government oversight.
Formally, yes. There's a chain of command.
But intelligence work, by its nature, often needs a degree of autonomy to be effective, doesn't it? How does that balance work in practice, do you think, given the history in these controversies?
It's that perennial challenge, isn't it? For any democracy, you need effective oversight, parliamentary, judicial to prevent abuses. But too much constraint, or the wrong kind, could hamstring the agency when facing real threats.
And that annual report comes back into play here.
It does, yeah. It's one mechanism for public accountability, even if it's, carefully curated.
Yeah.
The real key is finding those robust oversight mechanisms that work without crippling the agency's ability to do its job when secrecy is genuinely needed.
And you really can't talk about KAPO without acknowledging Estonia's history, can you? The experiences with Soviet influence, the ongoing concerns about Russia, that must constantly shape their work.
Absolutely. It's unavoidable. Estonia's geopolitical position, its living memory of occupation and interference, it's all deeply intertwined with its national security thinking and the specific kinds of threats KAPO prioritizes. It's not theoretical history, it feels very present.
So wrapping this up a bit, we've seen KAPO evolve from the Pol of the 1920s through incredibly tough times to the modern security service it is today.
Yeah, a long and often dramatic journey.
Its responsibilities are undeniably critical for Estonia's security. But as we've discussed, its methods and public statements haven't been immune from criticism.
And that criticism really points to that inherent tension, that balancing act every democratic security service faces. How to protect the state effectively while also upholding civil liberties and earning and keeping public trust. It's never easy.
Which leads us to a final thought, something for you, the listener, to mull over. Thinking about Estonia's unique history and its place in the world today, how might the specific threats and challenges KPU deals with be different from those facing, say, security services in countries with very different backgrounds or locations?
That's a good question.
And also, what more could you learn by actually looking at those annual reports, the Kaitsepolitseiamet? What story do they tell over time? How might comparing them perhaps to similar reports from neighboring countries give you an even richer understanding of Estonia's particular security landscape? Some food for thought there. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.